For question.
Alderman from the 25th, will you yield for question to the Alderman from the 7th?
Yes, I will.
Alderman from the 7th, please proceed.
Alderman, I'm having a chance to read this floor substitute. Looking at section 2B3, I see as part of this floor substitute you'll be asking for the Department of Human Services to provide basically an economic study of the impacts of this bill on a biannual basis.
Correct.
I'm wondering, are there any economic studies that you have done to support passing this bill today?
So there have actually been a number of studies that have been discussed in the committee hearing, and the mayor's office did present their, research in terms of the economic impacts that it would have on the city. So yes, there have been studies, but and they were shared, and actually there were a number of different studies that were included in our mailboxes earlier this week. And possibly last week as well. So, yes.
And so it's your belief that those studies conclusively say that raising the minimum wage in a city, not within a county, completely surrounded by a county, unilaterally, is a smart policy decision?
So, first of all, there's not many studies. There's even a Federal Reserve study that impacts the quality of life in the city of St. Louis and across the nation. No study will, and no true economists will conclusively say one way or another. They can draw from their theories and data and make their assumptions based off of the data that's before them. I think as an attorney, that word conclusively is a little tricky, but there are a number of folks that are very supportive of this. They believe that it is an economic driver within the economy, and that when we raise the wage, everyone does better that's in the middle class and lower income thresholds. Those are the lifeblood of our economy. And so when they do well, the economy does well too.
And Alderman, and I will agree with you that raising a minimum wage can have a positive impact on the economy. What I don't believe is the case is that raising it unilaterally as a city of 300,000 will have that impact. And that's why I will be voting against this floor substitute, but we'll continue to fight for efforts to raise the minimum wage at a state level. We'll support any ballot initiatives to raise the minimum wage on that level. We'll support anything I can do federally to raise that minimum wage. But in terms of raising the minimum wage unilaterally, I will not be supporting this floor substitute, and I hope many of my colleagues will join me. I think this could have a very deleterious effect on the economy of this city, specifically the downtown region. No more questions.
Any further discussion? Alderman from the 10th.
Hello. Thank you, Mr. President, members of the board. I rise in support of the Alderman from the 7th. There's no doubt that everyone needs to be paid more. But having owned my own business for 26 years, a small business, finding good employees and paying them well when I have them, going through tons of employees, over these 26 years, I've kept some as long as 18 years, because when you find good employees, you take care of them. And people who work hard and progress. We're not here to make decisions that make people feel good. This isn't about applause. This isn't about emotion. This is about doing things that are best for our wards and for our city. The city is next to a county with a new county executive who, I don't know if he gets along with us or not. I represent a ward that has many, many small businesses. Lots of restaurants, lots of food processing, lots of things. No one's afraid of paying their employees more. What they're afraid of is the unfair playing field we will be creating by taking the 62 square mile thing we call City of St. Louis and cutting ourselves off from a fair playing field from the county. This is a wonderful idea to pay people more money. I'm all for it. But we represent a city that has businesses that pay taxes, that go out of their way to support our region in beneficial ways, being benevolent, trying to help this region. You can't just spit in their face. You have to listen to the business owners as well as the underpaid people. But you also have to talk to the county. And this is, to me, I have many questions about all the details, but the first things first is, as a city, I believe we're hurting ourselves if we make this and pass this. I thank you for your time.
Any further discussion? Any further discussion? Alderman from the 8th?
Good morning, Mr. President and members of the board.
Come on.
I have a few things to say. A couple of things. I don't get my email at 12:30 at night, so, and I'm sorry I was busy this morning. I didn't have a chance to look at this substitute, but very quickly I can pick through a number of significant problems. But I do want to back up and ask the alderman from the 25th some questions.
Alderman from the 25th, will you yield for questions to the Alderman from the 8th?
It's always a pleasure, yes.
Alderman from the 8th, please proceed.
Alderman, I'm just trying to get an understanding here. How much do we collect in business license fees from the businesses here in the city of St. Louis?
If I recall the presentation from our license collector who's present today, it's roughly around $60 million a year that we collect in revenue from business license fees.
And I worked very, very hard against Mr. What's his name, Sinkfeld, to try to get rid of our earnings tax. But do you have a grip on how much the businesses generate to us in earnings tax?
It's roughly about 30% of our general revenue.
So about $148 million?
Correct. As Chair of Ways and Means, I know you already know that.
And what else do those businesses pay us besides that earnings tax?
Local use tax, sales tax. There's a variety of different taxes that the businesses pay.
And not only that, but we actually charge them an extra 0.5% payroll tax.
Correct.
Besides the 1% earnings tax. And then those businesses also pay a 1% earnings tax on the income that they earn. The businesses in this region and within our boundaries contribute significantly to the services that we provide to our constituents. And the one thing is, and I am a little embarrassed to say, that St. Louis lags in business growth. We lag the rest of the region. Why is that? Is it a perceptual problem? Is there a barricade at those 62 miles? Why do we lag? They don't have an earnings tax in St. Louis County. They don't have a 0.5% payroll tax in St. Louis County. You know what they don't have in St. Louis County? They don't have a gross receipts tax on our restaurants. And you know what we do with our restaurants? Not only do we have the highest sales tax rate in the region, our restaurants charge an extra 1.5% on top of that as a gross receipts tax. Those businesses generate significant revenue that we utilize here within the boundaries of the city of St. Louis. When you look at a restaurant, and then since 1981, I've been a CPA, and I've done thousands and thousands.
Madam, Alderman from the 15th, please state your point of order.
I'm wondering if the alderman from the 8th, who has a conflict of interest and has abstained from this, is in fact allowed to be talking on this fact at the moment.
I don't think he had a direct conflict of interest. He chose to take himself out of it. Alderman from the 8th, please.
He's been citing a conflict of interest as the reason for recusing himself.
Yeah.
I will address that.
Okay, thank you.
Alderwoman, did you ever see me quoted saying whatever you think I said? If you get your facts right, I've never said that. Thank you. And I will continue, Mr. President. And just because we have to put facts out there that you might not agree.
Alderman from the 8th.
All right.
You address me, not the Alderman from the 15th.
Okay. And I'm sorry that there's facts out there that they may not agree with,
Please
Mr.
proceed
President.
with your
I will proceed. Okay, so these businesses, and since 1981, I've been a certified public accountant. And that's all I've done my whole life. And from 1986 to about 2007, I had a CPA firm, and I only took care of small businesses, both advice, tax advice, tell people they're doing good, or tell them to close their doors. But I've seen these small business people, and $500,000 in sales is not that much money. When you have a restaurant that does $500,000 in sale, that owner of that restaurant, especially in these last 4 or 5 years, would be lucky to be making $5,000 or $6,000 or $7,000. See, these small business owners that I know, they don't work 40 hours a week. You know what? They don't work 50 hours a week. They work 60, 70, 80, 90 hours a week. They put everything they have into their businesses. They have borrowed from their families. They have worked. They've sacrificed. They make less than minimum wage if you're an owner and you're starting a business. And when I look at the restaurant business, and I am familiar with the restaurant business, that when your labor runs and you got a $500,000 in sales, which would be any little restaurant that's owned by a small mom and pop here in the city of St. Louis, and when you have $500,000 in sales and your labor is running at 35%, and that's just a standard number. That's $180,000, $190,000 in payroll. That doesn't include your payroll costs. It doesn't include your payroll tax you pay to the city of St. Louis. It doesn't pay the Social Securities, your share of it, if you're the employer. And what this does in the next 6 months, this raises the minimum wage in the city of St. Louis by 15%. That's $1 within 6 months by January 1st. That's a 15% increase. If I have $200,000 in payroll and I jack at $30,000, instead of making $5 or $8 grand a year, that business loses $20,000 a year. And the significance here is there is a boundary, a 62-mile square boundary. And it's just right over there. This should be done in conjunction with St. Louis County at the very least. All of us are sympathetic, especially the small business people here within the city of St. Louis. Very sympathetic to the needs of our residents, and they do, and if you talk to a small business person, they want to pay as much as they humanly possibly can pay. But they have to make a little money to keep their doors open. $500,000 is so arbitrarily low. But I'm going to go back to that barricade. Why are the businesses not here in the city of St. Louis? Why aren't they coming? I'd like to say the mayor's doing a fine job. Some of you might disagree with me. But from a business development, if the businesses were coming, the wages would be higher. What impediments do we put out there, both real and perceptual, that are keeping businesses from moving within our 62 square miles? Earnings tax, everybody, you know those people. Oh, I got to do the earnings tax. I got to do the payroll tax. I got to do the gross receipts tax. Some of it is misperception, and some of it is real. But as we go forward in the businesses that look and seek to move into this community and into these 62 square miles, what is their perception going forward? Should they work 60 hours, 70 hours a week, beg and borrow every penny from their family, sacrifice everything they have, and commit every penny that they own, can borrow, and their livelihood, and locate in the city of St. Louis because of the way that we treat businesses? And I'm not saying that earnings tax has been there for a long time. Payroll tax is relatively a newer thing. The gross receipts tax has moved around over the years since I've been here. We have an inordinate array of taxes. These businesses, and particularly the small businesses, is the growth of this country. This is the only growth that we're going to see, and we constantly see the large corporations leave St. Louis City, and they consolidate their headquarters everywhere. Some of it, again, is perceptual. We have an obligation to change that perception of the city of St. Louis. This process here and trying to do it, and I will get in, get comfortable, everybody. This process here has rocked the confidence of people who want to locate businesses here. The more businesses we have, the greater demand it is for our residents. That's what we want. We want the best and the highest wages available across the board. Alderman, would you yield? Alderman from the, Mr. President, would the Alderman from the 25th Ward yield?
Alderman from 25th, will you yield for questioning to the Alderman from the 8th?
I will.
Alderman from the 8th, please proceed.
Let me ask you this. I see that you put in a new section on franchises.
Correct.
Could you give me that location? I mean, like I said, I had to read that this morning, but we want to go through some of these changes that you've made so
that was
we
actually in
understand.
the committee substitute that I put before the Ways and Means Committee a couple weeks ago, actually. And I believe that that language...
Somewhere in there, you wrote it, didn't you?
In partnership with many attorneys, yes. I believe it's underneath the employer section of the definitions. Yes, it is. It's actually underneath the employer section, section 1,
Let's give you the page.
paragraph 2. It's page number 4. It's at the bottom of page number 4, lines 23 and 24, and continues on to page number 5, lines 1, 2, 3, and 4.
Okay. So, like, with this...
Thank you.
Okay. So what does this new change do?
It tightens the language around and the enforcement mechanisms around franchises.
So, like, if you open up the yellow pages and my neighbor is listed under A1 key and he pays a fee, usually those franchises are, you know, you pay a fee to the franchisor, you know, for using their name, and he just has 2 people, he works out of his house, but since it's A1 and they're nationwide, he would be subject to this, is that correct?
Yes. So if you are a single owner of a McDonald's franchise or a Hardee's or an A1 storage that is a franchise of a larger organization or an affiliate, yes, you would be subject to it.
Well, to put it in perspective, it would take about, I think it takes almost $4 million to get into a McDonald's, whereas to get into a striping, one of the franchise striping or college painters today, you know, you're talking $1,000 investment, $1,500, because franchisors do things that help people, small people start businesses. So, but this would apply to every small business like Able Lock or, you know, ABC Plumbing, anybody that has a franchise agreement, irregardless of how much they spent for that.
Correct.
And then how do we know that that would help anything? Did you think about those small people that couldn't get into business unless they were some type of franchise?
Yes, we thought about them. I'm not sure what your question is.
Well, the thing is, you keep projecting that it's McDonald's.
No.
The problem with McDonald's is they can lay off people. Okay, the difference with McDonald's and Hardee's and Arby's and these people, they have new computer technology that you would take a tablet like the Alderwoman in the second has. They mount them in the restaurant. You're starting to see that technology today, that they mount them in the restaurant. And you put your order in, because that way they get rid of an employee. The problem is that technology and the network within your system, it's cost prohibitive for the guy that's got the small business on the Hill or on South Broadway or anywhere in the city of St. Louis. That technology to implement it system-wide or just even in one place is $20,000 or $30,000.
Which is probably why it costs $4 million to open up a McDonald's franchise.
But at $500,000 in sales, our small businesses can't compete. And therein lies the issue. The big guys can respond by laying off people, but the small guys can't. They have to make a decision. I'm too close to the city limit. I may or may have to leave the city of St. Louis or close my doors. When you look at where the city of St. Louis is, and what we receive from the business community. And it's just not those big businesses. I know we like it when the lawyers come into town, or NGA, you know, we're going to talk about them a little bit later today. We're going to talk about those people. Well, they're paying $75,000 or $80,000 or $90,000, whatever those are, and we'll give them some tax benefits. This doesn't impact them. I understood, Alderman, and where is your exception or provision for the small companies that offer health insurance for their employees? And how do we incorporate that?
That would be an amendment that you would have to offer that is not currently included in it, in the floor substitute as written.
So the small businesses that offer health insurance, which is what all of us want and have encouraged across the board, those that offer health insurance are going to be even put in greater jeopardy. It will also, if I've got to come up $1 an hour on wage, and when you get your city W-2 and everybody out in the world outside, you can look at your W-2, and I believe it's box 12 these days. They put a little DD in there, and that's the code and the cost of the health insurance that's being provided to you, that you don't pay taxes on and isn't included in your income. We want those small businesses to offer health insurance to our residents. We want those businesses to stay in business, to pay the taxes we need to run the city of St. Louis. But to come up with this at 12:30 in the morning and say, well, this is the deal, is almost, and I know that Alderman Vaccaro is here, might shock you as much as it shocked you that Alderman Vaccaro, what did you do? Cut off the bait. You know, we at least have a responsibility to read this and let people weigh in. I did not participate in the debate, you know, heretofore. I realize that some people don't want me to say anything. And I've gotten that message from a lot of people. Not just to me personally, but people that are my friends and people I work with. And I don't appreciate that. And I'm dealing with that, and I'm very comfortable with that outcome. If you're going to put this on the informal calendar, I'll finish with my questions.
Any further discussion? Any further discussion? Alderman from 21st.
Thank you, Mr. President. Will the sponsor yield to questions?
Alderman from the 25th will yield for questions to the Alderman from the 21st.
I will.
Please proceed, Alderman.
Thank you, Alderman. So my concern about Board Bill 83 has not been at all about the intent. The intent, I think, is good. We have a crisis in the city. We have way too much poverty. We want to increase the wages that people earn in the city so they can provide for their families, pay their taxes, buy properties, spend things. It's all good stuff. My question, though, is about, always been about Board Bill 83, is the legislation itself and whether we are actually passing legislation that is going to get the result we actually want. So for me, the number one concern I have for my neighborhood is not just low wages, but the number one concern is unemployment and no wages. Okay? And so whenever we raise the wages by law, what we're doing is raising the cost of labor in our city. So for businesses, for entrepreneurs, for folks who are looking at our neighborhoods to come and open businesses and create jobs that we desperately need in our neighborhood, what we are effectively doing is raising their costs. And when you are playing at this level, just around the $8, $9 level, what you're really talking about is just low skill and really in many cases no skill labor. Now this is
a workforce of significant numbers in my neighborhood. Most of that workforce, low skill, no skill, not a lot of education, have no jobs, 0 jobs. And in fact, when you actually go out and like do a head count, I would say, especially among African American men of working age between 18 and 45, about 50% of them have no jobs in my area. And so what we're always trying to do is make our area look more attractive to folks. And so what I did know from the very beginning with the first version is that if the city of St. Louis unilaterally raises its cost of low skill and no skill labor to $15 an hour, while everybody else around us is almost half that, that will put us at a very serious competitive disadvantage. That will put me at a competitive disadvantage when I'm trying to get businesses in my community. Businesses, they have a choice. They have a choice. You know, I've been trying to get a QT in my neighborhood forever. QT flatly told me that they don't go north. They just don't go north. And for the reasons that they give, I think they are not good reasons, and I think those are all reasons that we can overcome. But if we raise the minimum wage to $15 an hour, that's a good reason that's hard to overcome, because they can open one right down the street, down West Florissant on the other side of the county line, get my same customers, because my folks are already used to driving somewhere else for services, so they'll just drive down the street and spend their money outside of the city limit. So I think that lowering the number is a step in the right direction. And I really wish we had more time on the committee level to really debate this how it needs to be debated. I think we moved in the right direction, but I think technically Board Bill 83 is still technically a bad bill. It's bad legislation. Let me walk you through some points. On page...
Can I answer that last question?
I didn't answer the question yet,
yeah.
But I'm getting there. On page 4, as you define employer, okay, let's walk through that. Employer means any individual, partnership, association, corporation, business, trust, or any person or group that a person acting directly or indirectly in the interest of an employer in relation to the employee, and shall include the city of St. Louis and its departments. So that means we would be included under this legislation, correct?
Correct.
Okay, but it goes on and says, but shall not include other government entities, which includes, for the purposes of this ordinance, any other unit of local government, the state government, or the government of the United States. So for instance, employees of St. Louis Public Schools will not be included, correct?
The way it's currently written.
So the janitors that work for St. Louis Public Schools would not get a pay increase.
Correct?
They're
a separate political jurisdiction of the state that we don't have jurisdiction over.
Okay. Does this include nonprofit organizations?
As it's currently written, it does not.
Okay.
That was a discussion that was taking place in the committee that ultimately didn't lead to anywhere.
Okay. So going down to subsection 1 there of E, going up, employer shall not include blah, 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 and it goes down to include, it shall not include those whose annual gross volume of sales, so not necessarily profit, but just sales, made or business done is less than $500,000. Now, as the alderman from the 8th pointed out, and believe me, it's not often I agree with the alderman of the 8th, and so I feel a little some kind of way about that. But but that's not a lot. So, you know, in terms of sales and profits are two different things. So a corner store might have sales of over $500,000, but a profit is very slim, and those folks are working their butts off every day in those stores, and so this would increase their cost of labor, correct? If they made if they had more than $500,000 of sales.
So, and you know, profit, I understand the difference between profit and revenue. However, the city as an enforcement mechanism doesn't have the ability to accurately gauge an organization's profit. We do, however, require them to tell us their revenue. And so that's part of the reasoning behind why the distinction is there in terms of sales versus profit. So
that corner store, all right, if they have $525,000 in sales per year, this will raise the cost of their labor. But if they have $475,000 in sales, it will not?
Correct.
Well, let me jump you forward.
I
here.
also have a number of those corner stores in my neck of the woods, and they are mostly employed with 3 or 5 people and are usually family.
Right, and so this would not apply to them.
Right.
I don't know about that. So you jump to subsection F. So it defines employee. Employee means any individual employed by an employer who has performed at least 20 hours of work within a calendar year. So not 20 hours a week. It means over the course of 12 months, I put in 20 hours of work. Okay? Whether on a, and this, I guess this is language added in the floor substitute, whether on a part-time, full-time, or temporary basis, and shall include contingent and contracted workers and individuals working through a temp service, staffing, and unemployment agency. So even if you only have, on average, 3 employees, but over the course of the year, because you have high turnover, you've had 15 or 20 folks come through, you don't keep them that long, then that exemption doesn't apply to you anymore, right?
So it would be 15 employees at one time. So if they're coming and going, you can't just add up their, cumulative number of employees that you've had.
Really? That's not how I necessarily read this. That's not how I necessarily read it. I think, and I would love to hear the city councilor's opinion on this or another lawyer, to me, between subsection F and subsection E2, which defines the number of employees, it sounds to me that it could be cumulative. So if you had 15 employees or you've had 20 people on your books that have worked more than 20 hours in the year, then you are no longer exempt.
If each one of those employees is working 20 hours a week?
Not a week.
So
they've worked a total of 20 hours on a calendar year.
Right, but so if they're working 20 hours during that calendar year, and they're doing so, part of the reason the language is in there is because there were fears on the committee during discussion in terms of folks not utilizing actual employees and paying W-2 wages, and so instead of doing that, they would contract out to temporary staffing agencies and other, employment agencies and the like. And so the language was added in there to make sure that anyone who's
I understand the intent.
Right.
Again, the intent I think is good.
Well, there have been
but the language itself,
number of attorneys that have been working on this. So I'm not an attorney, but I'm trusting the attorneys that have been working on this that they're.
You can read just like me.
I have read it.
Okay.
And
so to me though, but doesn't that sound like cumulatively, if you have 20 employees over the course of the year that have worked 20 hours each. So say you hire somebody, you work them 25 hours that first week, they stole something, you fired them. Or they cussed out a customer, you fired them. That counts against your number, doesn't it?
Well, and even if it did, some of the higher turnover industries, whether it's janitorial services, food services, et cetera, if you're going through that level of turnover, you probably should be paying your employees more. So yes, they would be.
But who are you to say that? I mean, who are you to say that you should? That's the industry. And why should we put businesses in the same industry at a competitive disadvantage because they decided to open their business on this side of the county line?
So, well, it's interesting that you bring that up again. Our neighbors to the east of us in Illinois have a minimum wage that's 60 cents higher than us at $8.25 an hour. They have not been crossing over into North St. Louis or into my neighborhood, and there's large employers in Madison and St. Clair County as well. So they're at a competitive, as you're stating today, they're at a competitive disadvantage at $8.25, 60 cents higher than what the employees on the St. Louis City side of this are making. They're not moving into your neighborhood. They're not moving into my ward. The large employers over there are staying where they are in Madison County and St. Clair County, even though they're at a quote-unquote competitive disadvantage.
Okay.
So there's plenty of testimonials.
All right, I think I do have the floor, so let me suggest to you why I think that is. So there is a certain level at which you can raise the minimum wage where it has no practical effect, which is what we did as the City of St. Louis a while ago. We raised our minimum wage as an employer from nothing to $10.10, and it had no practical effect because nobody made below that for the City of St. Louis anyway. And so even now, if we would have passed legislation, which I think this lowers it to, what is now the entry minimum wage in this flow substitute?
$7.95.
$7.95. That should pass unilaterally because it's not going to have practically that much effect economically. It's not going to have that much economic impact because there are so few people that make less than that right now. Now, when you start getting into territories of $15 an hour, that's when you're having a real economic impact. That's when it's costing somebody some money. Because right now, even a $12 an hour job, a part-time $12 an hour job is a pretty good job, pretty good part-time job for folks. And so you're raising the cost now of even those pretty good part-time jobs. And so I think at a certain level, so yeah, if they raise it from to $9 on the east side, it's probably not going to compete against us that much. But if they raise it to $15, it would. So I think there's a level.
Well,
and so that's what this whole conversation has really got to be about, is at what level. And like I said, when we were debating the motion to pull it out of committee, is that I think everybody down here agrees that we can't afford to raise the minimum wage by some number. The discussion on where that number is going to be. And then further, I would just say the discussion on the bill, this is a deliberative body, has to be about the language that we're passing. And what I don't like, and I don't like it about anything we do down here, and I'm always up here complaining about it, is that we're not giving ourselves very much time to make smart decisions. And so this language here that we just got last night at midnight, I just seen today when it was passed out, so I've looked at it less than an hour. I guarantee you, most folks down here have not read this, and we're being asked to perfect it. And I think there is a way we can compromise. There is something that we can work out that everybody can agree to that actually won't put us in too bad a position as a city. But I think there are some flaws in this language right now that is going to come back to bite us in the butt. Let me ask you something else that looks like it was a change made. On page 11, this in-home service workers change. Can you tell me what that's about?
So during the committee hearings, there were folks that came and testified, as you know, that were almost exclusively dependent upon either Medicaid, Medicare, or other programs that are revenue generated by state reimbursement rates. And so these were to address the concerns of those business owners so that they would still be able to maintain a service level for seniors, disabled, and the young people that they're taking care of.
So in-home services now get an exemption?
They do. It's an exemption from the rate, and they would be required to pay 65% of the current hourly rate underneath this ordinance.
Okay, so why is that particular industry just singled out?
It's not actually on the subsequent pages. There's language in there for the students, employees at child care centers, and also those living at assisted residential care or nursing home facilities as well.
So some industries were singled out and others were not.
Those that are exclusively deriving revenue from state reimbursement programs like Medicaid, Medicare, and other state-funded programs.
Okay.
They don't have the decision as to whether or not they can market, move, increase their revenue, et cetera. The reimbursement rates are mandated by the state.
Okay. But do you assume that there are not other types of businesses that would have similar problems with just increasing their labor expense?
I try not to make assumptions down here.
Yeah, that's a good policy. I think there are probably other industries too. And so when we create legislation now, or an ordinance, laws in the city that single out certain employers and certain kinds of industries about their wages, again, so when somebody's deciding to open up a business in the city of St. Louis or in the region, how much do they have to pay for labor? And the question will then be, well, it depends. It's not a simple decision anymore. We actually make it much more complicated now.
Well, it's not a simple decision right now either. If you look at
we make it even more
around
complicated.
wage and hour, it's very complicated.
We make it even more complicated now. Let's see. There was another issue in here. And so the full-time students exemption. So college students don't get a pay increase?
So there was a lot of feedback in regards to students working at corporations or in neighborhood businesses that do not necessarily have the education yet or the skill set to perform fully the functions of that job, and to basically eliminate those somewhat of internships or apprenticeship programs that in kind of the corporate setting would be a detriment to those that are in elementary and secondary education institutions. So they would still be provided a higher wage underneath the ordinance, but it would be exempted so that it's a certain percentage of the wage.
Would that also apply to adults who have gone back for education and they become
if they're
full-time? Okay. So they...
And there's also, there's exemptions in here. There's exemptions in here for work-study programs, and also, there's a number of programs that actually work with folks who are disabled that, are finding job placement, through organizations, and those are also categorized in this bill as well.
Okay, so if an adult right now, either a 25-year-old or a 45-year-old, is working in a job, next year this ordinance kicks in, their wages get raised to whatever the level is. Sometime over the course of time, they decide to go back to school. Their wages can be lowered?
That's unlikely, but technically...
Why would it be unlikely? When you think
it's very rare for an employer to do so, but so it is unlikely that something like that would happen.
But legally it could?
But legally they could.
Okay. All right. And then the last question, and I'll let somebody else ask the questions then, is how much is this going to cost? So I think the alderman from the 7th asked you if there was any kind of a study, an official study done on the economic impact of the original version of Board Bill 83, especially as the city, as an employer, how much would it cost us? How much are we going to have to pay additionally out of general revenue? One is, was there anything done on the original version of Board Bill 83 to say how much it would cost the city as an employer, or how much what's the economic impact on the region?
So there has been. In terms of the city, obviously the city is easier to study than the region itself.
I would think so.
But underneath the floor substitute, raising the city's rate as an employer to $11 by 2019, 2020.
No, so I'm asking first about the original, before the floor substitute.
Yes, there was, and Noel from the mayor's office came and testified.
Was that the official city representation of?
You may not agree with it, but yes.
What about the budget director? We pay a guy we're all familiar with on the Ways and Means Committee. Did the budget director come up with some numbers?
I'm sure the mayor's office was relying on the budget director to provide some numbers so that they could do the analysis.
But nobody down here has actually heard from the budget director on this issue.
Unfortunately, the Ways and Means committees were cut short, as you know. So further testimony and public hearings were not able to take place.
So then we should go ahead and pass it, even though we haven't heard from the budget director.
I'm actually going to move to put this on the perfection and formal so that we can continue having discussions around this as well.
Okay, that's pretty good. All right, so what's the difference between the economic impact of the original Board Bill 83 and 83 floor substitute?
Wait, sorry, I didn't hear that.
So some numbers have been changed from the original version of Board Bill 83 to your substitute. Numbers have been changed.
The floor substitute isn't before us yet. That's what we're doing now. We're having a discussion on whether we should vote to bring this floor substitute before us.
Okay. So I'll say that question for when the bill is before us. Thank you.
All right.
Mr. President, I'd like to move that we put Board Bill 83 into the perfection and formal calendar.
Madam Clerk, please place Board Bill 83 on the perfection and formal calendar.
So noted.
Alderman from the 17th? Yeah.
Well, if that's on the informal calendar, we're on the next agenda.
Yes, but yes, it's going on the informal calendar. Here's what I need you to do.
This bill is out of order at this point?
Yes. Alderman, here's what I need you to do. I need you to withdraw your motion for the introduction of the floor substitute.
I'm sorry,
I need you to withdraw your motion for the introduction of the floor substitute so that you can then...
I apologize. I withdraw my motion to adopt the floor substitute for Board Bill 83.
And Alderwoman from the 6th withdraws her second. Now you can place Board Bill...
I would like to move to place Board Bill 83 onto the perfection and formal calendar.
Madam Clerk, please place Board Bill number 83 on the perfection and formal calendar.
So noted. That's the extent of board bills for perfection.